Hogan's Heroes was an American sitcom that ran on CBS from 1965 to 1971. Set in a German POW camp during World War II, the show explores the various hijinks of a group of prisoners led by U.S. Air Force Colonel Robert Hogan. More specifically, how they constantly undermine their comically inept captors and make valuable contributions to the Allied war effort behind enemy lines. Not only was it easily the most lighthearted piece of fiction set in a World War II German prison camp, but it featured several well-known actors, such as future Family Feud host Richard Dawson and two-time Emmy Award winner Werner Klemperer. The man who donned the role of the title character and anchored the main cast through its 6-season run, however, was a boyish-looking Connecticut native by the name of Bob Crane. Crane had been interested in performing ever since he was a small child. He had learned drums at a young age, and by the time he was in high school was organizing parades and playing in the school's orchestra. In 1949, he married Ann Terzian, and the couple would later go on to have 3 children, Robert, Deborah, and Karen. Bob got a job at a New York radio station in 1950, working as a disc jockey. His fun and off-the-wall personality made him quite popular with the locals and caught the attention of CBS Radio. In 1956, they hired Crane to re-energize their fading flagship station in California called KNX. Bob was given his own show, which quickly became a massive hit. Mr. Crane continued to host the show for the next 8 years and managed to parlay its immense success into several television appearances. These included spots on Alfred Hitchcock Presents, The Twilight Zone, and General Electric Theater. After Carl Rayner appeared on his radio show as a guest, Bob convinced him to book a guest spot for him on The Dick Van Dyke Show, one of the most popular programs on television at the time. Mr. Crane's performance was well received and caught the attention of famed actress Donna Reed, who offered Bob a guest spot on her own very popular television show. His appearance on the show went so well that his character went on to become a series regular for the remainder of the show's run. By this point, Bob was considered a solid comedic star. His quick wit and dry humor had become very popular with television audiences, and offers were now coming in strong. He left his radio show in 1964 to pursue acting full-time, and the following year was offered the lead role in Hogan's Heroes. The role fit Crane like a glove. The quick-thinking, fast-talking colonel who expertly navigated the perilous situations the POWs turned spies found themselves in wound up being the performance that defined Crane's career, garnering him 2 Emmy nominations as well as mountains of other critical acclaim. Beneath the surface of all this tremendous success, however, Bob was harboring a dark secret that would not only destroy his marriage, but seems very likely to have contributed in some ways to his gruesome murder in 1978 at the age of 49. Now, there's no real family-friendly way for me to say this, so I'm just going to come out and say it. Bob Crane was a sex addict. He would often spend his nights and weekends out on sexual escapades with prostitutes and women he'd met at nightclubs. More specifically, however, Bob seemed to particularly enjoy videotaping his sexual encounters. He'd taken a great interest in home video and photography as a hobby, and had an entire production room in his house dedicated to storing video equipment and tapes. While on the set of Hogan's Heroes, co-star Richard Dawson introduced Bob to a man named John Carpenter. And no, not that John Carpenter. Carpenter was a sales manager for Sony Electronics, and would often help affluent clients with purchasing high-end video equipment. I'm sure you can see where this is going. John and Bob hit it off almost immediately, quickly becoming close friends, and soon it was discovered they both shared a similar appetite for recording themselves with young women. They began frequenting bars together, where Mr. Crane would introduce John to others as his manager. Using his celebrity status and considerable charisma, Bob would often make sure the duo left the bar they attended with a group of young women, who they'd take back to a hotel room and have sex with. Over the years of doing this, Bob amassed thousands of hours of home videos and thousands of photos from hundreds upon hundreds of women across the country. It became very difficult for Crane to hide his lifestyle from his wife, if he even tried hiding it at all. And according to his son Robert, he was made aware of his father's promiscuous nature as young as 16. Despite all this, however, Bob's children state he was a very loving and caring father. He wasn't even remotely abusive to them or his wife Anne, and went out of his way to make sure they had a fun and happy childhood. As far as vices were concerned, he didn't smoke and only drank occasionally, seemingly viewing his evening romps at the bar more as a vessel for meeting women than an occasion to get drunk. Understandably, though, his lifestyle started to have an impact on his marriage, and things seemed to come to a head when he began a romantic affair with his Hogan's Heroes co-star Sigrid Valdis. He and Anne divorced in 1970, and later that year Mr. Crane and Miss Valdis were married on the set of the show, with Richard Dawson serving as Bob's best man. Hogan's Heroes was canceled in 1971 after its 6th season, despite still being relatively popular. Bob assumed the next phase of his career would be a seamless transition, as he had risen from the ranks of disc jockey to leading actor on a comedy series within the last decade. Later that same year, Sigrid gave birth to a son named Scotty, Crane's 4th child, and a short time later the couple adopted a daughter. Sigrid was apparently aware of her husband's extracurricular activities, but didn't participate herself and seemed to kind of just begrudgingly accept what he was doing, for a time at least. Bob started off the post-Hogan's Heroes stretch of his career by appearing with 2 of his series co-stars in a comedy movie called The Wicked Dreams of Paula Schultz that was not very well received by critics or audiences. He would make sparse appearances on several different television series throughout this time, but couldn't quite seem to find anything solid that would keep him regularly employed. To pass the time between roles, he began to work in roadshow dinner theaters, which may sound really beneath someone with his resume, but was actually not that uncommon for movie and television stars of the time. He'd actually been doing this as a side gig while Hogan's Heroes was still on the air, and by all accounts really enjoyed it. Acting in front of a live audience really played to his strengths as a performer, and the shows he played in were quite popular. This would allow him to travel across the country meeting new women and feeding his ever-growing appetite for sex and making homemade pornography. Mr. Carpenter would time his business trips with Crane's dinner theater tours so the two could meet up on the road and continue their escapades together. Bob's addiction was starting to encompass every aspect of his life, however. His son Robert recalled often seeing pictures his father had taken of women. His other son Scotty claimed his father's collection of pictures had become so massive they were even spilling over into family albums, something his mother Sigrid wasn't very happy about. When Bob was cast in the lead role of the 1973 Disney film Superdad, his brazenness on set about his sexual escapades stunned many of his co-workers. Apparently, it was not uncommon for Mr. Crane to bring in albums of naked women he'd photographed and show them off to people he worked with. According to his son Robert, Bob didn't view this as something that would make people uncomfortable or have any ill intent behind it. More that he just saw it as something fun and never really thought it could get him in trouble. You have to think, though, when you're the lead character in a Disney movie called Superdad, this probably isn't the smartest thing for you to be doing on set. Executives at Disney discovered this, and needless to say, were not very happy. Sexual promiscuity in one's personal life was one thing, but when they're on set for your family-friendly film sharing photos of nude women with their co-workers, that's something entirely different. Mr. Crane wasn't fired from the film right away, likely because he'd signed a multi-film contract, and if they terminated him, they'd have to explain why publicly. But it severely hampered any future prospects he had within the company, and he was never offered a lead role again, only appearing in one more film produced by them. By this point, work was becoming hard for Crane to come by. Frustrated with the limited offers he was getting, Bob continued to work in dinner theaters across the country. In 1975, a ray of hope appeared when NBC approached him about starring in a sitcom simply titled The Bob Crane Show. He readily agreed, but unfortunately the show did not perform well and was canceled after only 13 episodes. To make matters worse, things had become rocky in his home life as well, leading to him and Sigrid separating in 1977. Bob would continue to rely on dinner theater productions to maintain his income, and would make small guest appearances on various television shows for the remainder of his life. A life that came to an end on June 29, 1978. Crane was staying in Scottsdale, Arizona, where he was performing in a play entitled Beginner's Luck at a local theater. That Saturday morning, he had not shown up for work, which was very unlike him, and one of his co-stars went to his apartment to check on him. As she entered, she walked into the bedroom and made a gruesome discovery. The 49-year-old Crane was lying on the bed, having been beaten to death and an electrical cord tied around his neck. At the time of Mr. Crane's death, the Scottsdale police didn't even have a homicide division, with Bob's murder being one of only 3 homicides that took place in the entire district that year. And as word got out about the television star's death, the enormity of the case quickly showed itself to be beyond what they were capable of dealing with. Several procedural missteps with regards to evidence handling took place, including the police allowing Bob's family to fly in and take items from the scene before they were even completely finished processing it. These errors would prove very costly in the future. The police found Mr. Crane's videotape and photograph collection, which led them to John Carpenter, who had been in Phoenix a few days earlier to visit his friend. Police were immediately suspicious of him, as he'd not only been one of the last people to see Bob alive, but autopsy results revealed the instrument used to bludgeon Mr. Crane was likely a camera tripod. Furthermore, when the rental car Mr. Carpenter had used during his trip was examined, trace evidence of blood and tissue were found inside of it. Blood type testing matched Bob's blood type, however, DNA testing was still a few years away, so nothing could be conclusively proven. John adamantly denied killing his friend, and with nothing but circumstantial evidence, prosecutors declined to file charges. As word got out to the public of Bob's sexual escapades, many wild theories and rumors began to arise in tabloids and other news publications. Above all, though, while Mr. Carpenter hadn't been charged in a court of law, as far as the court of public opinion was concerned, he was as guilty as could be. Many, including Bob's own family, vocally spoke of their belief he was guilty. According to Mr. Crane's son Robert, his father had been complaining in the weeks leading up to his death that John had become a nuisance and was intending to cut off the friendship. He believed that Carpenter was enraged by this, as without the charm and celebrity of Bob around, his ability to feed his own considerable sexual addiction would rapidly diminish. By 1990, DNA testing had now become available, but was still in its infancy. Investigators from the Scottsdale Police Department had some of the blood samples tested, but the results were inconclusive. In a devastating blow, the all-important tissue sample had been lost due to clerical error by the SPD's storage department and was not available to be tested. Photographs of the tissue still remained, however, and police secured expert testimony which stated that the piece of human tissue in the image was brain matter. A judge ruled this evidence was admissible in court, and despite the case being a bit of a Hail Mary, murder charges were filed against Mr. Carpenter in June of 1992. As the trial began, things started to go bad for the prosecution almost immediately. Mr. Carpenter's defense effectively attacked the incompetence of the police's investigation, pointing out how they'd failed to secure the crime scene from contamination, as well as how they'd lost crucial evidence. Furthermore, they provided witnesses who'd seen Bob and John dining together just one day before the murder to disprove the theory that their friendship had become frayed. They stated that because of the nature of Mr. Crane's extracurricular activities, there was a good chance that the husband or boyfriend of one of his lovers had been the culprit, and provided tons of convincing evidence to support this theory. This included a man who'd taped a mutilated newspaper picture of Bob to his ex-girlfriend's door after finding out the two had slept together. This also included an actor from Texas who'd gotten into an argument with Mr. Crane a few months earlier and had sworn revenge. Even his ex-wife Anne was floated as a potential suspect. Throughout the whole trial, John Carpenter repeatedly maintained his innocence, stating Bob was his best friend and that he would never have done this to him. Prosecutors were unable to effectively counter all these arguments without any concrete physical evidence, and Carpenter was acquitted of all charges. He lived the rest of his life out quietly before passing away in 1998. In the years that followed, the case still remained a hot topic in the media. Mr. Crane's children had their own unique way of handling the public discourse around it. Robert still stated his public belief that Carpenter was responsible, and even floated around the idea that his father's second wife, Sigrid, had played a part in the murder, as she'd been the one who gained the most financially from Bob's death. In 2015, he published a book on the case entitled Crane: Sex, Celebrity, and My Father's Unsolved Murder. His other son, Scotty, who himself had become an aspiring actor, also had a very unique way of dealing with the public eye on the case. In 2001, he launched a website that allowed users to view some of his father's pornographic pictures and videos for a fee. Unsurprisingly, Bob's other children, including his half-brother Robert, denounced this as nothing more than a soulless money grab, which further tarnished their long-dead father's now utterly destroyed public image. Scotty defended his actions, stating that he released the photos and videos to refute some of the rumors about his father's sex life that had gained traction in the media. A few years later, the website was structured into a more traditional memorial for his father, but is now no longer operational. In 2002, a film called Autofocus was released starring Greg Kinnear as Crane and William Dafoe as Carpenter. The film heavily implied that Carpenter was responsible for Bob's death, but stopped short of outright making the accusation. The film was received well by critics, but panned by Crane's children for what they described as sensationalism. A last-ditch effort was made to uncover the truth about Mr. Crane's death in 2015. Using modern forensic technology, Scottsdale police tested the last of the blood samples from Mr. Carpenter's rental car. In a stunning result, the test found that the blood from the car did not match Bob Crane. Instead, it was found out that the sample contained DNA from two contributors, one profile for an unknown male, and the other two degraded for police to make a determination. With the last bit of forensic evidence now gone, it seems very unlikely this case will ever be solved, something Mr. Crane's surviving children have publicly acknowledged. If you enjoy things like true crime, criminal justice history, and mysterious stories from around the world, consider subscribing to the channel so you can be updated whenever we post a new video. We post new content every other week, usually on Mondays, but sometimes later. So it probably wouldn't hurt to click that notification bell if you want to be updated the second something new is posted. This is Crime Spot, and thank you for watching.